So with all that kind of like being said, with the constraints upon your training, and we touched on how it kind of really creates like a really kind of like fundamentals first approach to your sort of like training, or how your training looks. Are you able to maybe outline what kind of like a typical week of training might look like for you? Or if it works like that, I don't know if you kind of work on weekly cycles. Monday is always this team, Tuesday is this team, or whatever. But it would be really interesting to kind of get, I guess, some more sort of like specific details upon how you might train throughout a cycle.
Yeah. So obviously, like a cycle through fall, will be different than what
Yeah,
I
of
may be doing.
course.
But typically, the way that I train is very feeling based.
Okay.
So I know what my basic layout is. I know that day one, which could be any day,
Mhm.
depending upon how many hours I've had to work that week, what my mental stresses may be that week. If I wake up and my body is telling me that it is extremely tired and fatigued, I'm going to listen to it. So day
Do you
one is,
factor the weather into that? Sorry to cut you off. Do you factor the weather into that as well? So, for example, if you know that, I don't know, if you know that you might have like a warmer couple of days in New York on a Wednesday and a Thursday, that might impact your training in comparison to whether you know that you've got a warmer couple of days on a Saturday and a Sunday. Might that sort of like factor in how you choose to set that week up?
yeah, definitely. So I will
Yeah,
definitely check the weather ahead. I'm
yeah.
also open to, like I said, I've been rained out of events. So, if the weather forecast says sun and it rains that day and I have to adjust for that, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
One
Okay.
thing I do is I attempt more often than not to stress myself out about I've got to squeeze the work in. I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Great point.
Yes. A typical day one would be an acceleration day. So, something that I hope, especially if anybody, follows my Instagram account, my hope is that people can see that you can train at an elite level. And that's all relative. For some people, elite will be, a 13-second 100-meter dash. But if that's you having gotten faster, like I'm happy that you took it upon yourself to train to that.
Mhm.
But the goal is for people to see that you can work with the least, and still push yourself to do things that you had no idea you could do.
Mhm.
I don't know any other sub 10-10 or sub 6-6-5 athletes at this time that either do not have an agent, do not qualify to travel with their country, or are not supported in some way, or have access to like a warm weather training facility. I don't know anyone else in that situation. So one of my biggest goals is to share through my social media account just the very basic ways that I train that work for me in a cold weather situation with minimal resources.
Mhm.
I'm proof that you can do a lot with a little.
Mhm.
So as I was saying, a typical day one is probably going to be an acceleration day. An acceleration day in the fall, it's probably going to be pretty low volume. Like if I wanted to make a mock workout plan for some young training group out here, or my master's training group,
Mhm.
I something for myself like maybe 4 to 5 20-meter sled sprints. And I'm a really big fan of contrast work. So
Okay.
I would maybe, let's say, like for the first rep, let's say I want to go up in distance. The first rep, I might do like 50 pounds for 10 meters. Then I would do maybe, 40 pounds for, 15 meters, and so on and so forth. And just descending until you're sprinting really far with no weight, that kind of thing. Uh, a day two is going to look like a recovery day. It's going to be tempo, I guess what people would call tempo. But my training outside of my sprint days, and an acceleration day is a sprint day for me, is
Mhm.
basically recovery for the next sprint day. I look at myself as a battery. So I, excuse me, I feel that through what I've read and what I understand about sprinting, that to become faster, when you train speed, you should basically be like 100% recovered. You know, if
Hmm.
you're 85% of your capacity, your 100% on that day is still only 85% of your maximum capacity. So you didn't, in my opinion, train to become faster that day, although you ran fast. So when I'm recovering between sprint days or acceleration days, you know, I'll hop on a treadmill. I like the treadmill now. It's not like a typical thing, but because I've trained on them so often, I will definitely do some treadmill work. I'll get on a bike, maybe throw some bands on my legs so I have a little bit of added resistance. And if I'm really feeling good, I'll go find a long hill to run up and just do some repeat sprints where I'm working on form. Um, and that actually was one of the major changes that I brought into the last 2 years, was not doing, and this might sound crazy to a lot of the higher distance athletes, but I don't typically do any work where my body begins to fall apart mechanically.
Yeah.
Once I
Okay.
once I see a mechanical like
Degradation.
yes, that's the perfect word. Once that happens, I'm done working out. So if
Okay.
my workout was, let's say, 5 times 150, and I started to see effects on the mechanics for the negative on the third rep, that's my day. And I'll probably have 2 of those tempo days in a week, and then in fall I'll double up on acceleration. So it's like a sandwich, you know, acceleration, tempo, tempo, acceleration, and then you can squeeze some lifts in there. And typically I like to do my heavy lifts on my fast days. It's just like it kind of makes sense to me.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely prefer to lift after I've sprinted.
Hmm.
I'm not big on high volume in the gym either. Like a heavy lower day is like that's one in a cycle, one in a week. That's more than enough. So low volume, heavy weight, and I'm moving it fast. And part of the reason why I train with such low volume is one of the podcasts that I had been that I had come across, I think through suggestion by a friend in my community, I think Scott Gilbert. So Scott, if you're listening, thank you for that podcast. It was about I think an Eastern European coach. And long story short, he was explaining that in the States, you know, you have a large pool of athletes. So you throw a ton of kids into this to one workout, somebody's going to thrive, and then, you know, whoever doesn't, it's okay because we have so many athletes. But wherever they were training out of, they didn't have enough athletes for that to be like a viable way to train their athletes. They need to figure out like what can we focus on to make sure that each one of these individuals gets better. And they had the resources to test the fast twitch density,
Hmm.
the fiber athletes' legs. And there were 2 athletes running relatively around the same times. But, you know, let's say one was like 60% fast twitch fiber and the other athlete was 90%. What that coach did was, you know, he lowered the volume
Hmm.
for the higher fast twitch fiber density athlete, and increased it for the lower volume athlete. And what they realized, you know, if you were to flip flop or to try to make them meet in the middle somewhere, they were going to lose gains in performances. And although I don't have the ability to test the fast twitch fibers in my legs, I just looked back through my performances through the years and was willing to see if potentially, which I assume that I might be a higher fast twitch fiber or fast twitch fiber dominant
Hmm.
athlete. And
Yeah.
that played a role in why I had always felt so fatigued during longer runs and why my mechanics were so off. And then, you know, I'm doing these fast 250s. And then when I get to the track, you know, in the end of my 60 or the end of my 100, you know, I've got the monkey on the back and I'm hard, like what's going on here. So I take those things, you know, I put them into my training, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you know, I toss it out and I learn from that. But yeah, so my typical training week in the fall is probably an acceleration day, a little bit of tempo, get some lifts in, an upper body and a lower body day, and then another round of acceleration. And those 4 runs that could take anywhere from a week to a week and a half if need be, depending upon like what my work schedule is like. Or it could happen in, you know, in 5 days. So
Okay. All right. So the four sessions would be acceleration, tempo, then repeat that process. So kind of like two sets of two
Yeah,
workouts.
I will rest between like a block of two. So if I have an acceleration and then a run, I'm gonna take a day off
Yeah.
and do it.
Okay. All right. So and that's sort of a minimum, and like you say, that could extend out depending upon sort of like other external factors, how you're feeling, work schedule, weather,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. All right, cool, fantastic. That was really helpful. Thank you. And I always find it, one of the things that I've sort of noticed as well is kind of like having been around some people that have kind of competed at a very high level is that they're not necessarily doing as much training as you think they might do. It's not like, you sort of watch like the Rocky movies or whatever, and then you think, oh, these people, they must be sort of, like training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, whatever. And my experience is generally they're not doing that. And I think that's quite an interesting and quite an important piece of information actually, that you can get a lot done with less than you think.
Yeah, that's actually really big. I actually, outside of my group of athletes, or the coaches that I'm able to talk to on a regular basis, I most often don't discuss my training. But here I am on a podcast, share it with them. I think most people would think that I'm crazy, or that there's got to be something off about this. But the way that I see it is, your body is like, like your iPhone. If you deplete the battery, you need to recharge it for like optimal performance. If you charge back to 10%, yes, you can use it. You can probably use it through every app that you have on the phone. But if you take a trip, from Long Island, New York up to Buffalo, the phone is going to die, long before it would, had you otherwise allowed it to completely recharge. And that's how I see my body now. So I am not caught up on this idea that, like pain is success, and if I'm not doing something at every minute or every moment of the day, that I'm losing something. And that's something big that I try to talk to the athletes that I work with, or try to express to them, is that you should take your rest very, very seriously. I really believe that that's where the gains in speed are made. I don't have to rest quite as much as I did last year because I think I'm just generally more in shape now. I've been doing this a little bit. But there were events like if I PR'd, I would sometimes rest up to probably like a week and a half almost, where I'm taking like 4 or 5 days totally off, and then start to slowly maybe get on the bike. Really focused on like hydration, my nutrition. But there was no way that if I ran a personal best or had tied a personal best, that I was going to go immediately back into sprint training. And I know that not every elite athlete will necessarily agree with this style of training, and that's okay. But realistically, there aren't that many people in the world that are faster than I am right now. Yeah. So it's not a lot of people that I'd be hard pressed to take their.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. You're having somebody that's running a second slower than you, telling that you're training wrong. It's like, well, what's the
right?
Where's your credibility in that discussion? Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. Yeah, I agree.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, no, I've finished. Don't worry.
And obviously, I don't know everything. I've, hopefully been very upfront about being willing to experiment. I'm still doing that. This is like what I live for now, is learning how does speed work? What is the body capable of? Can we push past like the common, like most of us believe you peak at, 22 or 23, can we push past those barriers and move into new territory that is like accepted by the mass, that maybe what we thought what once was is not really how things are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will be continuing to do exactly what I do, which is think, to use my mind, run it by the coaches in my community, the athletes in my community. I get to talk to you, and I really appreciate that. I always love to have a good discussion about speed and what it is, what it takes, how we can improve upon it. And I definitely believe that rest is one of the major factors in improving speed. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that I won't come across that kind of challenge or counter something that I may believe. Obviously, I haven't run under 10 seconds yet. I believe that that's coming. And if somebody, suggests that, hey, well, maybe you need to go out there and run a couple of 300s, maybe you'll see me in a 300 at some point.
You're praying that's not the case, though, aren't you? You're praying no one's coming to do that. Okay, excellent. So thinking I guess and you've touched on sort of one of the technical aspects with regards to your sort of acceleration and how your body angle with relation to your shin angle and that. But are there sort of any technical cues that you feel have really resonated with you? That things that you really need to think about when you're sprinting from a technical perspective to make sure that you kind of get the best out of yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually, excuse me, and I don't want to word this. I try to take on new experiments, one step at a time, and at most 2 at a time. So, for example, I was saying that for my season opener, I wanted to work on my intensity off the block and that I was driving. I wouldn't also then give myself a cue word, arms or something like that. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, but usually what I'll do is find 1 or 2 at most things that I want to work on those things, and then just go right back to practice and try to capitalize on what I feel I'm doing well, and then move on to what I feel could use more work, or stumble upon something that I didn't know needed to be worked upon. But I don't really have any cues necessarily when I'm at the line like that.
Okay.
Something though not so technical, when I am at the line, this is just a thought that kind of came to my head. I am very big on getting up and doing things that you may not want to do. And if you can't find time to do it for yourself, do it for somebody else. So I do believe that every time that I get on the line, even if I didn't want to get there and it was really hard getting there, there may be some young person, some master's athlete who I don't know is watching me. And this means anyone, and it's not just track and field, but someone may be watching you and they may be inspired to continue pick up something that they otherwise would have not if you didn't get up and go. And this season was actually pretty tough. I had got rained out of another race. I was in a family pet, 17 years, passed away mid-season, and this is all in a really short time. Was having some issues with my car, so there was a point this season where I was just I don't even want to run. I was really fortunate to get into some last-minute meets, but I think 6 out of the last 8 races that I've been in were into the finals were into a headwind, and I was just I cannot catch a break. But again, looking back last year and feeling that and seeing the progression into this year, I don't see any reason why that progression is going to stop. My practice numbers tell me that there's really no reason that it should. You never know who's watching you. It might just be inspired to get up and go. So my cue online is really just suck it up and do well for somebody else,
Okay. All right, cool. And I guess sort of that actually segues quite nicely into my next question, but I'm going to flip around the way that I ask it, because I normally ask what's your favorite running session and your least favorite running session? So, you talk about days where you don't want to be on the line. What might workout be that you're on the line thinking, and I guess maybe it's slightly different for your style of training than it would be. I mean, we sort of just joked a minute ago about 300s, for example. But are there any workouts that you're doing that you're thinking, I don't enjoy this, but I know that I need it?
Yeah. So really, for the most part, the way that I train, there are not many sessions where I'm not enjoying what I'm doing.
Mhm.
But I actually have run some 300s this season, and
Okay.
yeah, I would say I don't look forward to those. There are I've just in the spring season began to add in a little bit of lactic work, more so in preparation for being able to handle like competing in rounds, and
Okay.
events that are more than like a day's duration. So for example, one of the workouts that I'll do is like like a fast 180 or a fast 120. So we're talking like under 21 seconds pace,
Mhm.
um, for either or, and yeah, maybe about 5 minutes rest, and then I'll hit maybe like anywhere from 4 to 6, uh, 40 to 60 meter runs, and there'll be 1 minute rest in between those.
Right.
That
Okay.
I actually hate that workout. There's not like a like at all, and that workout sucks. And
I
that's
can
that's one.
imagine it's pretty tough by the end of it, like the accumulation of that work with limited recovery. I can imagine that's not pleasant by the time you get to like the last couple of 40s or 60s or whatever it is.
Yeah, it sucks. But like I know it's gonna make me stronger, and I'm not gonna leave it behind just because it's painful. It's like I'm excited to see the benefits of that down the road, because that's something I only really started doing this spring, and I'll
Okay.
definitely be throwing some of that type of work into the upcoming fall training. So, uh, and then in regard to, excuse me, a workout that I like. I like a lot of the work that I do actually, but sled sessions are always fun for me.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I sled and hills are probably like my favorite thing. Um,
It's
you know,
lucky
when
that
I
you're
was,
an acceleration-based program then, right?
yeah, you gotta like it, right? Yeah, I really love being on the hills, and I'm big on like training in nature too. So like I said, I once
Right.
thought like because I have a track that this was like a setback, but I'm always like in the grass. There's like nice scenery around me. You hear the birds chirping. And I'm over here like self-training to run under 10 seconds. Like it's a fun experience. I'm a big hill guy for sure.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll do hills even in season. I don't think it's just a preseason workout, but I'm willing to have a discussion to be told otherwise, but we'll see.
Okay. All right, cool. And then the final question, and you sort of touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could maybe go into a little bit more detail. So in terms of your recovery, and you mentioned in the last couple of years, you've sort of changed the way that you sleep. And you mentioned kind of in 2022, you kind of tried a keto type approach to eating, which you felt like didn't work. So obviously you're very considered with your nutrition. So I guess like my original question was how closely are you monitoring these things like sleep and nutrition? And I guess the answer is very closely. But it'd be interesting to kind of get a little bit more detail on sort of the methods and what you're doing within your sleep and what you are doing. Sorry, from a sleep perspective to support your performance and what you're doing from a nutritional perspective to support your performance.
Yeah. So nutrition and sleeping habits are like very, very important to me. These are things that I did not care about at all. And they absolutely make a difference in your performances. I'm not like a calorie counter, or, I don't have a stopwatch or, fancy watch that's telling me how many hours of sleep I had. I believe I had mentioned before, I'm very much by the feel of things. So I
Mm-hmm.
will experiment with something several times, and if it feels right, that's good, I'll keep it, and if it doesn't, I'm going to toss it out. So it's sleep in season, like standard or typical 8 hours. That's what I'm looking to get. I will not sacrifice that. Obviously there are situations, like if you're traveling or these types of things where you don't always get to be where you want to be at that
Right.
time, but I'm in a local New York race, maybe something like Millrose or New Balance. I'm not going to be, like hanging out with my friends, or, having like unnecessary conversations that can potentially distract me from being able to get the rest that I need to get in preparation for those events, especially because I'm not making millions of dollars doing this. I believe obviously that I have the opportunity to put myself in a position where this can be a full-time job, but as this time it is not. So I'm going to like make the necessary sacrifices to make sure that I'm as rested as possible and eating things that are like conducive to successful performances. So when it comes to like nutrition, basically I just like went pretty simple at first. I if I was eating like Taco Bell twice a week, I cut it down to one. I didn't go cold turkey on anything, but eventually I got to the point where I completely removed like fast food in season. Completely removed fast food diet. No alcohol in season. Alcohol is a big one. I think that everybody would be faster if they didn't drink, even in small amounts. I just don't think it's good for the body. But that's just my personal opinion. Do what you want in season, out of season. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of common sense, isn't it? I don't think there'd be too many people that would turn around and say that, the counter, which is, you'd probably be a little bit faster if you drank more. I don't think there'd be that many people that would turn around and say that. So yeah.
Yeah, and like it's not that it's specifically alcohol itself, but I just think the lowering of inhibitions and then like the excess calories that might come with that, and then you're a little bit in the morning, like those things affect the next probably 2 to 3 days, and that's like that matters. That could be the difference between 10:01 and 9:99. And actually. I'm way backtracking here, but I actually had a 10:04 performance this season, and this just goes into like the power of like rest and like confidence and nutrition. But I was coming off of actually a 10:3 run at Icon. It was like pretty shook up emotionally, stuff going on off the track, and had just gotten rained out of an event, but I really wanted to kind of like give in to my, like urges. I wanted to, maybe eat a little bit more cake, maybe have like a drink or two, relax. But I really decided to kind of just suck it up. And this is around the time that the family pet had passed away also. I called up Coach Brian. I talked to Coach Z. I let them know how I was feeling, and they helped me to stay on track. And I took my rest seriously. I took my nutrition seriously. I'm very big on I'm basically a pescatarian in season. It's a lot of fish, a lot of small fish. I try not to eat like larger predatory fish. I sound a little nerdy here sometimes, but just to stay away from the mercury content. And I do shellfish also. I know that there are potential health concerns, especially with raw shellfish. So I will also get like smoked or canned cooked versions of those. But I'm looking to eat food that is like high nutritional bang for your buck, and also like pretty much like as light on your stomach as possible. Like I like to light while I'm running. Fish digest easier for me than red meat in season, so I don't eat a lot of red meat in season. I look at that honestly as like a treat while I'm actually training. But outside of the season, I'm gonna have my Chipotle chicken burritos and my taco. But yeah, so I actually was able to go down to Florida, and I actually ended up running 10:04 down there at an event that Shakari and the young guy Isam competed at. But unfortunately, that event was not registered by the organizers through the IAAF, so I didn't receive any points for that. And I came up like just a hair shy of the point qualifier and the time qualifier this season. And again, that's another thing. I kind of want to be upset. I was a little bit blue after the season ended. I would have liked to have maybe gotten into some more events. Like New York City Grand Prix here would have been a really good opportunity. And know when I'm racing and be able to really focus on those. And that just wasn't the situation this season. But what am I going to do about that? I'm gonna sleep well, I'm gonna eat well, I'm gonna be patient, and I'm gonna show myself and hopefully the rest of the world like what I'm capable of and what people are capable of when they honestly like just take themselves so seriously, almost to the point of a fault. Even if just for a short amount of time, in seeing what they are capable of, um, in regard to whatever passion it is that they put their mind to. Mine just happens to be running.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to finish off by saying thank you. You've been a fantastic guest, and I think that your story, I think a lot of the people that are listening to this, it's gonna resonate with, it's gonna connect with in terms of I say that like there's lots of people listening. I don't know how many people listen, but I would imagine, that there's people that are interested in sprinting, that want to sprint, that have some kind of limitations on or constraints on how often they can train, the facilities that they have, all that kind of stuff. And I think that what makes your story so interesting is that you're also dealing with those same constraints. But yeah, you're out there running world-class times. So I really think that there's a lot to be taken from this interview. I obviously wish you all the best. I know how seriously you take it. I feel like obviously next year, an Olympic year, you're going to be coming out swinging, trying to make Paris. And, I wish you all the best in that endeavor. All right. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Miles.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.